Evolution is defined as descent with modification. It is this modification that is responsible for the diversity in life that we see today. Within this biological diversity, we see similarities between different organisms. These similarities are often a result of common ancestry. Tigers and cats both have fur as a result of a common ancestor that also had fur. The common ancestor of lizards and snakes had scales too. As species evolve over millions of years, this leads to increased species diversity, and we can model how these species are related using phylogenetic trees. A phylogenetic tree is used to show the evolutionary history of multiple species. The branching patterns of a tree show us how species are related to each other through shared common ancestry. Some of the major components of a tree include the root, the branches, the tips, and the nodes. The root represents an ancient time point, and as we go further up the tree, the closer we get to modern day. The branches represent different lineages, and we see as time goes on, these lineages begin to split. The tips of the tree represent unique and independent lineages, in this case, different species. The point at which these branches split are called nodes, and these nodes represent a common ancestor. Trees are a hypothesis of a species' evolutionary history. And because we can't go back in time and record the exact history of a species, scientists use different types of data to come up with phylogenetic hypotheses of common ancestry by comparing anatomical structures, genetic material, and the fossil record. When comparing species, we often see similarities in anatomical structures. For example, when we look at the front legs of a dog and the front legs of a horse, we see similarities in the bone structure. These structural similarities are due to common ancestry. The ancestor of both dogs and horses must have had a similar front leg structure. We call these similarities homologous features. Scientists come up with hypotheses of species relatedness and shared common ancestry by comparing homologous features. The more homologous features shared between two species, the more likely they share a common ancestor. We can also observe homologous features during embryonic development. Here we see similarity in structures during development of a fish and a human embryo that are not visible later in life. Both embryos have a head, gill slits, and a tail. These homologous features are indicators of common ancestry. Molecular evidence, such as shared genetic material, can also be an indicator of common ancestry. Scientists can compare the similarity of DNA sequences, the A's, T's, C's, and G's of an organism's genes to hypothesize how these species are related. The more genetic material shared between two species, the more closely they are related to each other. Here we can see that species 2 and 3 share more of the same DNA than they do with species 1. Species 2 and 3 got this shared DNA from their common ancestor at this node. The fossil record allows us to see species that once lived on the earth but are now extinct. We can compare homologous features of these species in the fossil record and the species that are alive today to hypothesize these lineages' evolutionary histories. Here we can see the similarity in the wing bone structure of the extinct pterosaur and the modern-day bird. When comparing species, we also need to be aware of analogous features. These are features that are similar, but their similarity is not because of a common ancestor. One great example of analogous features are the wings in birds and bats. While both organisms can fly, we know from comparisons of anatomical data these wings are not due to a common ancestor. Here we see that the bat wing is much more similar to the bones in a human arm than the bones of the other flying organisms. Birds and bats evolved wings independently from each other, but similar environmental pressures led to both organisms evolving the ability to fly. Homologous features allow scientists to come up with hypotheses of species relatedness and their evolutionary histories. Here we have an example of a vertebrate tree. From this point, we know that all of these species shared a common ancestor that had a spine. As we move further down the tree, we know that the mouse and the human shared a common ancestor that had either hair or fur. Understanding how species are related is crucial to understanding the biodiversity of our planet.